What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Hutch Coming in Clutch. I'm your host, Hutchison Brown, and today we've got a fantastic show. We are preparing for battle for Week 6 of the 2025 NFL Fantasy Football season. Before I get into the show today, please follow me on Twitter. I'm at HutchisonB_FF. Make sure you follow me on every podcast app, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, Amazon, wherever you listen to your podcast, as well as subscribing and commenting, liking on YouTube. I greatly appreciate you. So without further ado, let's get into the podcast today. We are talking about a bunch of different things, starting with some bye week updates. Returning from bye this week, the Chicago Bears, the Green Bay Packers, the Atlanta Falcons, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. So all four of those teams, make sure those players who are on your bench this week get back into your lineups if you want to start them. And then going on bye this week, the Vikings and the Texans, a couple things to look out for as we get onto this bye week for them. JJ McCarthy, number one, the health of JJ McCarthy. Is he going to be okay for week 7? Because looking at the timeline of his injury, he very well could return in week 7. It'd be nice to see him fresh off a bye return, hopefully learned a bit more, getting ready to play better in this offense. Now with Jordan Addison back, he's another weapon here. Let's hope JJ McCarthy comes back and he's good to go. And then with Texans, watch out for Woody Marks. Like I mentioned with Matthew Golden last week on the Packers, when they were on bye weeks provide a huge opportunity for young players to get more involved in their offenses because the team recenters, regroups, and recalibrates what they need to do for the rest of the season. And a lot of the time that includes getting younger players the ball more. And we've seen Woody Marks flash some really great talent the last couple of weeks. And while one of the games were really good for fantasy, one of them wasn't. Both games he flashed some serious talent. And I think Woody Marks could get very involved after the bye for the Texans. So keep an eye on that as they return from the bye week. So let's go to the injury updates now. Quarterback Lamar Jackson for the Ravens. He is out with a hamstring injury. This is likely going to be a post-bye week return for him. So like week 8 or 9, hopefully we see him come back. Kyler Murray, questionable with a foot injury. I think he will play on Sunday, but that foot injury could limit him in the running game. So slight downgrade for fantasy purposes. And then Brock Purdy for the 49ers. He is out with a toe injury. He sat out week 5. He sat out multiple weeks this year. And Mac Jones is going to be the starter now. So keep an eye on that. And interesting fact about the 49ers, they're top 5 right now in the NFL in passing yardage, despite being, mixed up at quarterback between Mac Jones and Brock Purdy. Really interesting stuff. Now let's look at the running back position. Saquon Barkley. This is one you really got to watch, guys. Has not practiced at all. I'm recording this very late on Wednesday night, so I have not seen Thursday practice reports, but Saquon Barkley plays Thursday night. And if he's not practicing on Wednesday, that means there's a real shot that he's going to miss Thursday Night Football, especially considering the Giants get a team in the Eagles get a team in the Giants, who they will very likely beat and will likely have an easy time beating. I don't think the Giants are going to put up a big game against the Philadelphia Eagles. No offense to Jackson Dart, Cam Scatterboo. I just think this overall Eagles roster is a lot better. I think we're going to get the win the Eagles are going to get the win this week. So they might not need Barkley, and as a result, they might be hesitant to play him. So keep an eye on that for fantasy purposes. Chuba Hubbard for the Panthers, questionable with a calf injury. He missed week 5. Hopeful for a return in week 6, but his status is uncertain. After such a big Rico Dowdle game, I have a hard time believing they're going to force Chuba Hubbard out there if he's not 100% ready to go. So I think Hubbard misses again this week, and Dowdle gets to start against the Dallas Cowboys, a potential revenge game for him. He's been posting on Instagram. He talked about it in the locker room after the game. He's excited for that matchup. So I think he'll get the start, and he's definitely worth playing in fantasy. Now let's look at Tyron Tracy for the Giants. He is questionable for Thursday Night Football with the shoulder injury. He's expected to play, it looks like. He's been in limited practices all week. He's expected to make a return. Now, will he be fantasy relevant? I don't know. But he will likely at least be involved as a receiver in this offense because the Giants lost Malik Nabers earlier this season. They've also just lost Darius Slayton, who we'll talk about in a minute. He's going to be out for the game. So they're going to need pass catchers. And Tyron Tracy, we know he's a very good pass catcher out of the backfield, as well as Cam Scatterboo. He's been providing in that area for the last few weeks for this team. So watch out for Tracy to at least get some PPR value. And I wouldn't want to start him in fantasy football, but some people have no options. So in your deeper 12 or 14 or 16-man leagues, you can play him as a desperate flex. Now let's look at Jalen Warren for the Steelers. He is questionable with that knee injury, expected to return, and he's back in fantasy football lineups as the starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Joe Mixon for the Texans. Texans GM Nick Cassero. He said Mixon is expected to return possibly within the next few weeks of this season. I'll be honest, I'll believe it when I see it. Otherwise, I just don't think Mixon's coming back for a while. And Tony Gibson for the Patriots, he is out for the season with a torn ACL. Just really unfortunate here for him. Season ender. Really sucks to see that in the NFL all the time, man. So Gibson, prayers and thoughts for him and his recovery, but he's going to miss this season. And as a result, we could see that impact him long term in his career, but hopefully he comes back next year strong. But now Maureen Hampton for the Chargers, placed on IR. Best to him in his recovery process from that ankle injury. He was leaving the game in a boot, which is pretty concerning for the Chargers. Looks like a high ankle sprain. He will miss at least 4 games. And when he comes back, we're not sure if he's going to be fully healthy because that high ankle sprain is one that can linger. So definitely keep a close eye on this injury, especially as we get more towards that 4-week mark to see if he's going to return. And when he returns, is he actually good on the football field? But for now, it's going to be Kamani Vidal, Hassan Haskins, and Naheem Hines, who the Chargers recently brought up onto the team. And maybe anybody else they trade for. Breece Hall and Alvin Kamara both look like potential trade targets for NFL teams right now. For wide receiver position, CeeDee Lamb for the Cowboys, he's questionable with the high ankle sprain they suffered a couple weeks ago. Given the fact that the Cowboys did not put CeeDee Lamb on IR, week 7 would be the 4th week of the injury. So we should expect him to return between week 6 and 7. 6, 7. So keep an eye on that one. I would not expect him to play in week 6. I would keep him on your bench, but potential in week 7 to play. Now, Darius Slayton, we mentioned earlier, he is out for Thursday Night Football. That gives other opportunities to Theo Johnson, Wan'Dale Robinson, as well as Tyron Tracy at the receiving end, like we talked about a minute ago, if he plays. Then Terry McLaurin, optimistic for week 6. That's great to see. I'd love to see this superstar wide receiver come back to this offense. And if he's active, I mean, he's probably in your fantasy lineups as a solid wide receiver 2/flex play. But do not make you bench Deebo Samuel. He's been on fire, and he's got to stay in lineups right now. And then Darnell Mooney, questionable with a hamstring injury. He's fresh off the bye week. I'd really hope he plays. I think he has a lot of upside in this offense if he were to be healthy to be the clear-cut number 2 wide receiver on this team. But hey, this is just not a situation I can control. Hopefully Mooney comes back healthy and hopefully we see it. But that's just something we have to wait and see on. For now, he's on fantasy football benches. If he's on your waiver wire, I would definitely at least consider picking him up because I think there could be fantasy value here. We saw almost 1,000 receiving yards last year. If he had played 17 games, he would have hit 1,000 receiving yards. So keep an eye on that one. And then Christian Watson opened the 21-day practice window. This is awesome to see, man. Christian Watson's always been a player that I've rooted for. He seems like a fun, energetic player with a lot of energy. I love to see that, man. But injuries have really taken away a lot of his NFL career thus far. Hopefully he can come back and make an impact on this team that has a lot of injuries right now, wide receiver, and a lot of inconsistency as well. And at tight end position, Jatavian Sanders for the Panthers, questionable with an ankle injury. And then Brenton Strange for the Jaguars was just placed on IR with a lower body injury. This makes Travis Hunter very intriguing for fantasy football. I talked about him on the Tuesday episode of someone you want to buy low because while the targets haven't been there consistently and fantasy managers are disappointed overall, he's made some really great plays for the last couple of weeks as a receiver. And when you make flashy plays like that as a rookie, you get more opportunity. And now with a Brenton Strange injury, who's earned 14 targets in the last 2 weeks combined, this is a huge opportunity for Travis Hunter to be an impact player in this receiving offense. So keep an eye on that. But that's going to be all for the injuries. Let's get into my coming in clutch and fudge players of the week. My coming in clutch quarterback of the week this week is going to be Bo Nix against the New York Jets. Over the last 4 weeks for Bo Nix, so after week 1 where he really struggled, he's been averaging 20 rushing yards per game and has finished as a borderline QB1 in pretty much every single week at worst. Looking at the matchup this week against the New York Jets, and they're a fantastic matchup for fantasy football because they allow over 30 offensive points per game. That's second worst in the NFL. And then when you look at the Jets on offense, Justin Fields is able to throw the football well. He has no interceptions this year, no turnovers at all. He's playing very efficient football, and Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall are playing great football. This offensive line is working just well enough to make it work. This offense puts up points and are able to compete. And that's a situation where Bo Nix is going to be able to easily throw the football against a bad defense, but also have to throw the football because this Jets offense is able to stay up and compete in games. So Bo Nix is a great start in fantasy football and a potential high-scoring game between the Jets and the Broncos. Now let's look at running back. My coming in clutch running back this week is Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt of the Washington Commanders, taking on the Chicago Bears this week. The Chicago Bears have allowed a 14-plus point per point running back in PPR scoring in every single game this year. They are bottom 5 in rushing yards allowed and fantasy points allowed to the running back position. And we saw Jacory Krosky-Merritt take over this backfield in a different way. 14 rush attempts, 2 catches. He also saw 2 catches last week. He has that sneaky PPR upside. We're starting to see it. They're starting to get more involved in every asset of the game, and it's great to see. And would love to see him continue it against one of the league's worst rushing defenses. So start Jacory Krosky-Merritt. Now, looking at wide receiver, my coming in clutch wide receiver of the week. This one I really like. This is Xavier Worthy, wide receiver of the Kansas City Chiefs, taking on the Detroit Lions. Rashee Rice still isn't back yet, so Xavier Worthy is the clear-cut wide receiver one of the offense. We've seen 15 plus targets in each, or no, sorry. We've seen 9 and 8 targets. So do quick math, 17 targets over the last 2 weeks combined, 5 plus catches in each of his last 2 games. And we've seen really consistent fantasy football production. I know it's only been 2 weeks, but he was injured a lot. So 2 weeks of really good fantasy football production. And now we get a matchup with the Detroit Lions. Now, initially, they seem really threatening on defense. They have a lot of talent, but they have lost DJ Reed and Terrion Arnold to severe injuries over the last week, meaning that their secondary is seriously depleted. And when you have an explosive speedster like Xavier Worthy who can make a touchdown on any play, you don't want to have backup secondary on this player. Like this is a matchup that I really like for Xavier Worthy. I think he comes away with a huge play and potentially a huge touchdown in this game. And also KC and Detroit, these are 2 great quarterbacks, great offenses with a lot of talent. We should expect a pretty high scoring game in this one. I would expect at least like 49 plus points or 50 plus points in this game. And that's going to lead to more passing than volume for Xavier Worthy. So start Xavier Worthy in your fantasy football lineups, guys. And then at tight end, this isn't the best matchup, but I really like the player. It's Dalton Kincaid. He's having a breakout before our very eyes, and not many people are talking about it. He's 9th in receptions, 2nd in yards, first in catches of 20 plus yards, and 4th in yards after the catch per reception, and 3rd in PPR fantasy points per game right now. He is dominating the fantasy football landscape right now at the tight end position. Many people who drafted an early tight end are struggling. George Kittle got hurt. Brock Bowers hasn't played well, but Dalton Kincaid is dominating right now. He's doing really, really well, and he's making big plays and consistently being involved in this Bills offense. And now he gets a matchup with the Atlanta Falcons, where it isn't the best matchup, but Kincaid has struggled Kincaid has played well in bad matchups and good matchups this year. So I'm just kind of trying to call out that Dalton Kincaid is a must start pretty much every week in fantasy football right now because he's balling out. Now, let's head to my O-Fudge players of the week. My O-Fudge quarterback of this week is going to be Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals against the Indianapolis Colts. He has not finished top 10 in any week yet this season. Not good. Even if he plays this week, he has that foot injury that could potentially limit his rushing a little bit, which is scary because Kyler Murray hasn't done very well as a passer this year. And the only thing that's been keeping him alive in any way for fantasy, which not very much, because again, not top 10 quarterback in any week this year, the only thing that's kept him alive is rushing value, and we might not even have that to the same level this week. And he gets a matchup with the Indianapolis defense that currently are bottom 5 or top 5 in points allowed to offenses right now. They just don't allow points. Their defense is playing very well right now. I just don't trust Kyler at all. Just don't start him. Now let's look at Alvin Kamara, the New Orleans Saints. He's my O-Fudge running back this week. And looking at Kamara, I don't think this is a must bench because he has receiving involvement and he's probably a safe 8 to 10 point floor. But I'm expecting a very limited performance. The Pats really held down James Cook against the Buffalo Bills last week. They've stopped a lot of running backs this year, especially with James Cook, a really good one. And Kamara has the Pats this week. And also the trade rumors around Kamara are really strong. It seems like a trade might legit happen. And as a result, we're seeing the Saints start to limit Alvin Kamara in his practices and in the games. And Kendrick Miller is getting a lot more involved, and he's playing very well, which means the Saints are not going to be afraid to continue to limit Alvin Kamara in his touches. And as a result, it leads to less fantasy points. So I'm not feeling great about Kamara as a start that you want, unless you just want 8 to 10 points in your lineup. Now, let's talk about T. Higgins. He's my O-Fudge wide receiver this week against the Green Bay Packers, and I kind of want to make this a rest of season take as well. Joe Flacco is not the answer. He has more than 1 turnover per game this year, just in interceptions, just like Jake Browning, and he's like 10 years older and way less agile and not as willing to throw the football downfield. Like, Joe Flacco is simply not the answer. I mean, I know he's been fantasy football gold over the last couple of years in Cleveland and Indianapolis, but when you look at what he's done so far this year, The old man age has really started to hit Joe Flacco. He has not looked like the same player on the football field, and especially behind a Bengals offensive line that is allowing pressure at a bottom 3 rate in the NFL right now. He has concrete feet, and he's not gonna be able to escape pressure and make plays with his legs, which means downfield routes for T. Higgins and Jamar Chase aren't gonna be able to develop very well. And as a result, we're just not going to see this work for fantasy. I think he might be a slight upgrade over Jake Brown just because he's a veteran. He knows the system. He knows what he's doing. Uh, but honestly, it's not much. And I think a lot of people are painting it like it's a great thing for T. Higgins, Joe Flacco. I mean, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, and I do not think so. So I would go ahead and sell T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. I just don't think that this is the upgrade that many think it is. And the matchup this week of the Green Bay Packers, who are a bottom 10 or a top 10 passing defense right now, I'm just not interested in T. Higgins. Jamar Chase, you probably have to start because you have no choice. But T. Higgins is benchable, and you can take him out of your lineup this week. Now let's go to tight end. My tight end Fudge player this week is Mark Andrews against the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams aren't necessarily great against the tight end position in terms of defense, but I just can't trust this receiving core with Cooper Rush delivering the passes. 179 yards and 3 interceptions last week, 2 completions of 15 plus yards. It just leads to Mark Andrews looking like a really tough option to want to start in fantasy football. I would try to find an option on the waiver wire like Mason Taylor. I would definitely start him. Dallas Goedert, I would start him. Harold Fannin, I would start Harold Fannin over him. David Njoku, I'd start David Njoku. Like, I find somebody else, man. Mark Andrews is not the answer this week. Now let's go to my listener Q&A. We're talking about a bunch of players and a bunch of situations here. Half PPR format. Tony Pollard or Ladd McConkey. I'm going to go with Pollard here. The rushing volume has been there as well as the pass catching work. And Spears could get more involved over the season, but last week you only saw 4 rush attempts for 18 yards and I think 1 target. It just wasn't there at a high level, and it could get more over the season. But for now, as it stands, Tony Pollard is getting a lot of rushing volume and significant receiving volume. And Ladd McConkey, we saw the touchdown last week, but he only had 5 catches for 39 yards. Like, it wasn't elite production. Keenan Allen and Quentin Johnson are still stealing volume. So I'm looking at Pollard as a guy that you should be starting on a weekly basis in fantasy football until we see more involvement from Spears, which might not ever happen. Now let's look at this question. This kind of game will transition to a reliable flex play / bye week replacement after a big week in the UK. If Jaylen Warren's inactive, sure. But as long as Warren is active, he's the RB1 of this team. I mean, I wouldn't expect anything different because Warren has played really well for this team when given the opportunity. He's been very reliable for this team. And when he was on the field to begin the season, Kenneth Gainwell was a very secondary option in this offense. And look, he had a one great game, but I don't think that's going to drastically change his backfield. Maybe he gets a little bit more opportunity, but not to the point where he's a fantasy relevant start. So again, to answer the question, only if Jaylen Warren's out can you flex Kenneth Gainwell. Now, the next question is very simple. Hold Woody Marks? With a question mark? Yes, absolutely hold Woody Marks. Old man Nick Chubb will not hold off the young talent in Marks forever. He's looked really good over the last couple weeks. And yes, Chubb has been serviceable, but Marks is a young, exciting rookie that's quickly worked his way up this depth chart. I think it's not for no reason. I think he will get involved heavily in this backfield soon. It's just going to take time because he's a rookie, a late round pick. It might take time to get him over the veteran, but eventually I think we'll get there. And now let's go to the last couple questions here. I have to start 1 wide receiver and 2 flexes in a half PPR format. Juwan Jennings, Kendrick Bourne, T. Higgins, Chris Godwin, David Njoku, Hassan Haskins, and RJ Harvey. So we're going to play one of those San Francisco wide receivers here for sure. If Juwan Jennings is active, you play Juwan Jennings. If Kendrick Bourne is alone, like Juwan Jennings isn't playing, you play Kendrick Bourne and hope the Mac Jones and Kendrick Bourne connection continues into this next week after a 100-yard game from Bourne last week. And then looking at T. Higgins, Chris Godwin, David Njoku, Hassan Haskins, RJ Harvey, you got to pick 2 here. David Njoku is my first pick. Dylan Gabriel and him showed a great connection together in their first game. I'd hope that continues this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the next one's tough. I think if it was Jake Browning, I might honestly lean T. Higgins just because we saw Godwin last week only receive 4 targets. But because it's Joe Flacco in his first week against a really tough Green Bay defense, I'm going to go with Chris Godwin and hope that we see more of the targets that we saw in week 1 against the first week back against the Philadelphia Eagles with 10 targets rather than the simple 4 we saw this past week. So Godwin, Njoku, and whoever is playing between Juwan Jennings and Kendrick Bourne is my option there. Now, looking at the last question, should I drop someone for Hassan Haskins? And here's his roster that he sent me, or her roster that she sent me. Jordan Addison, Zach Charbonnet, Rico Dowdle, RJ Harvey, T. Higgins, Terry McLaurin, Brock Purdy, and Brandon Ayuk. The one player I definitely am looking to drop here for Hassan Haskins is Brock Purdy. I'm assuming this is a one quarterback league. Sorry if I'm wrong. I'm assuming this is a one quarterback league. Most redraft leagues are, most home leagues are. Brock Purdy is a replaceable quarterback in fantasy football. He is not an elite player. He is not a difference maker. He's a replaceable fantasy football asset. You can find guys on the waiver wire every week that are putting up levels that are meet his production or better than that. So Brock Purdy injured is not a player you want to keep on your bench. Hassan Haskins, while I don't think he will be the lead back, he has the chance to be the lead back in Los Angeles while Maureen Hampton is out, especially, he gets a lot of third down where he could see some pass catching work. So I would definitely drop Brock Purdy for Hassan Haskins for that upside of the lead back in Los Angeles. But that's going to be all for the Q&A. And now we're going to jump into the over-unders of the week. We have brought on a very special guest, Dave Kluge. Make sure you stay around. All right, everybody, we are back and we have brought on a friend for the over-under segment. Please welcome on a fellow football guy, Dave Kluge. Dave, welcome to the show, man. How's it going?
Going good, man. Thanks a lot for having me. This is fun. You were on the launch pad just a few weeks ago. Now we get to flip the tables, and I get to be the guest here. This is a good time, man. I love in season content. There's just so much like speculating when we're talking in the preseason. In season, there's like actual football to talk about, and I just can't get enough of it.
Yeah, it's fantastic, man. And every week it feels like when you're going through all the scores of the games, the stats, and looking at different numbers, rewatching some things, you see things where it's like, oh, this player was doing so well. I completely missed that. Like recently, I was just looking at Dalton Kincaid's numbers, and it's like he's literally a top 5 10 on the season right now. He's breaking out before our very eyes. And that's something I feel like I should cut on to earlier, but I didn't. Like it's so fun to go through the season, look all through these scores and these stats. And we're going to look at some stats today on the over under segment. Last week we weren't able to have them, but 2 weeks ago we had another fellow football guy on the show, Joey Wright. And overall in the week we went 1 for 6, not very good. Joey went 1 for 3. I went 0 for 3 on that Eagles Bucks game we talked about. But the theme for this week, we are talking about backups to starters, players who originally would have been secondary pieces of their offense, not really fantasy relevant, but now due to injuries on their team, they have huge opportunities. And we're going to start with Thursday Night Football with the New York Giants, Theo Johnson. With Darius Slayton out for Thursday Night Football, Malik Neighbors continuing to be out, it's a huge opportunity here for Theo Johnson, obviously Wan'Dale Robinson as well. We've seen Johnson step up the last couple of weeks, specifically last week. He caught 2 touchdowns from Jackson Dart, caught 6 of his 7 passes, and we got a big opportunity here. So the line I'm putting, Dave, last week is at 33 yards. This week, the over-under I'm putting at is at 29.5 receiving yards for Theo Johnson. His yards per catch has never been very high so far this year. He's always been in those 0 to 10 yard range in terms of receptions. So what do we think? Johnson, 29.5 yards.
I'm taking the over on this one, just because, like you said, Darius Slayton out of the picture, Malik Neighbors out of the picture. They're going to need to get the ball somewhere. And what we've seen from Jackson Dart in these first couple of weeks is that he does like targeting Theo Johnson. Now, it's been kind of weird is Theo Johnson hasn't made many plays after the catch, and that's what he was drafted to do. 6'6", 260 pounds, size-adjusted speed in the 98th percentile. So we want to get the ball in his hand and allow him to create the way that good tight ends do, like we saw from prime Travis Kelce, like we're seeing from Brock Bowers and Tucker Kraft nowadays. And that's the type of athlete that Theo Johnson is. So clearly, when these guys were working together throughout training camp on the second team, they built some sort of connection with each other. I think they're going to continue nurturing that. I think Theo Johnson is kind of the number 2 receiver here. We do have to factor in Tyrone Tracy coming back in this game as well. He's going to be fresh and rested up where everybody else is banged up on a short week. Tyrone Tracy is going to have fresh legs. I expect him to catch a lot of passes as well. But Theo Johnson, I'm expecting him to get somewhere between 30 and 40 yards in this matchup.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think he's a huge red zone threat as a result, a big fantasy football option. And I like Theo Johnson rest of the season too, because the thing is we saw, I think it was an ankle or an ACL last year, like a significant lower leg injury that really impacted him. We didn't see him come back till later in the offseason, and that could be affecting him right now. That could be why his yards after catch isn't too hot, because like you said, Dave, that's what he was dominant with at Penn State. Like when we saw this kid play, he was big and he was tall, but he was actually incredibly athletic for his size, making some big plays after the catch. I wonder if we see more of that as the season goes on, because right now his yards per catch, I don't have the exact number on me, but I know it's very low. But I'm agreeing with you here. I'm going
6.6.
Yeah, 6.6.
6.6
Yeah.
yards per catch, not great. And you want to talk about Penn State? You know who went to Penn State was Tyler Warren, and that's how
Yeah.
good Theo Johnson was in college, that he was keeping Tyler Warren off the field. So, yeah, this guy can play, and it's only been a matter of opportunity since he's come into the league that's held him back.
Yeah, 100% injuries as well, like we saw last year. So I'm gonna agree with you here. I'm taking the over with Darius Slayton again out. Like that's another piece that Theo Johnson's gonna have to be involved. I expect at least 4 to 5 catches, and he should be able to get to 30 yards. So let's talk about the Chargers backfield because obviously Amari Hampton went down with that ankle injury, walked off the field with a boot late in the game. That wasn't a good sight to see. He's been officially placed on IR, going to miss at least the next 4 games. So we got to talk about this Chargers backfield. What do we think of Kamani Vidal, his rushing line? I'm putting it at 9.5 rush attempts. Obviously, they signed Naheem Hines. They have Hassan Haskins there. What do we think about Kamani Vidal against the Miami matchup? 9.5 rush attempts over or under.
I'm going to take the under here. I expect Hassan Haskins to actually be the preferred early down running back. So I think Kamani Vidal, he's a very good pass catcher. We know that about him. Like the one big play last year that got people so excited about his rookie season was this wheel route that he caught like 35 yards downfield. And I think that's where he comes in. And historically, what we've seen in these Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh offenses is a split backfield. And I think that was their intention when they had Omari Hampton and Najee Harris. They had to lean on Hampton without Harris there. But now that you see two guys with complementary skill sets, neither of them are really supreme talents. I think we do see it split up a little bit. Haskins obviously being the bigger guy with a connection to Jim Harbaugh going back to their time together at Michigan. I think he's going to be the early down guy. I'm expecting him to get between 15 and 18 touches. I think Kamani Vidal can really be useful over the next month while Omari Hampton is on IR. But in games that they're going to have a negative game script where they are going to have to throw the ball and matched up against Miami, they're big favorites in this matchup. I think this is more of a Hassan Haskins game. And I think in some of the tighter matchups, that's when you might want to lean a little bit more towards Kamani Vidal.
Yeah, honestly, I think we've seen a lot of Hassan Haskins on third downs, though, in pass blocking situations, in those passing downs as well. And we saw 4 carries for Kamani Vidal in the fourth quarter when Marion Hampton did leave that game. Maybe that was just an all of a sudden, just you have to move quick on your feet with Hampton out. That's what they gave Vidal. And now with a plan in place, they put Haskins on those early downs. But I think in the Miami matchup, I think I'm just going to take the over here. I think we just see a lot of running for this Chargers team in general. They started 3-0. They've lost 2 straight. This is a big bounce back opportunity for this offense. Miami's defense has not been able to stop anything, not in the past, not in the run game. And like you said, I think the Chargers are going to have a heavy lead in this one. That leads to a lot of running the football. And I think that Kamani Vidal just barely gets over 9.5. I would project him like 10 or 11. Like, I think that's where he's going to see. So I'm going to disagree with you here slightly and take the over. But I do think Hassan Haskins will be involved as well. And both are very desperate flexes in fantasy this week that I wouldn't feel too great about. But let's go to Michael
And this
Carter.
one, I think what makes this one especially tough too is that, like, I don't know if we saw a clear picture of what they're going to do with these running backs, because by the
Yeah.
time that Hampton went out, they're already down 2 scores, and it just seemed like they wanted to get out of that game as quickly as possible. So this is a tough one, and I mean, I think this matchup is good enough. Like, if we want to put a fantasy spin on this, I think this
Mhm.
matchup against Miami is good enough that, like, I wouldn't feel great starting either guy, but I think both Kamani Vidal and Hassan Haskins are guys that you can put into your flex because this team could easily rush for 200 yards and 3 scores on the ground against Miami.
Rico Dowdle just ran for 200 yards himself against this team just last week,
Exactly.
and that's Rico
Ex
Dowdle. Like, that's who we're talking
exactly.
about here. This Miami defense cannot guard anybody. So the last one we got to talk about here is Michael Carter. So we saw last week with James Conner and Trey Benson out what this backfield looked like. Amar Mercado fumbled the football late. Zonovan Bam Knight, I think he got in the end zone last week, got a little bit involved. So Michael Carter, though, seemed to be the lead back with 18 rush attempts. He also saw 5 targets, caught 5 passes. He got just over 50 rushing yards. Now he gets a tougher matchup with Indianapolis. So what do we think here? Michael Carter over or under 46.5 rushing yardage.
I'm taking the over in this one, and this isn't a great matchup. Like Indianapolis's defense, they're pretty middle of the pack, but they're a good offense that I think is going to force them to have to step on the gas a little bit when the Cardinals are on offense. I think what we saw was kind of a floor game for Michael Carter. I mean, 18 carries and 5 targets. That's a huge workload. Like they're treating him very much so like a workhorse. And this guy does have good speed if he can get in the open field, and we didn't see a lot of that in this matchup. But with a line like that, if you know the guy's going to be getting 18 to 25 touches in a game, all he's got to do is break one to smash that over. So I have confidence in him doing that at least once in this matchup.
Yeah, I'm going to take the over as well. And specifically, you got to look at DeMarcado after that fumble and just realize that he's going to be put in the shadow realm. Like, he's not going to be touching the football again because, look, when you look at Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, like we saw specifically actually with JT last year, he dropped the football at the 1 yard line. And with those kind of talents, you say, You pat them on the back, you say, "Hey, that was stupid. You gotta be better." And next week they get the football again. But with a backup to a backup, that kind of play is not going to be tolerated with much grace. This is going to be a bad situation for DeMarcado. I expect him to be behind Zava Bam Knight, and Bam Knight barely saw touches last week. So I think we could see even more opportunities than last week for Carter. And like you said, with a line of 46.5, you just need one carry. And Carter is very explosive. We've seen him be a solid starter for NFL teams in the past, like with the Jets and in spot start opportunities with other teams. So I'm looking at Carter 46.5. I'm going to take the over as well. So Dave, before we wrap up the episode today, I know I didn't put this on the show doc, but I want you to give, is there any last minute advice for week 6 you got for the people?
Um, Last minute advice for week 6. I think we're still at the point where you just want to start the guys that you drafted to be starters. Of course, there are some extenuating circumstances out here, like T. Higgins. I understand, like getting a little bit nervous about him, but an improved situation with Joe Flacco there. Lad McConkey is a guy that you drafted to be a starter, and I know a lot of people are starting to get nervous, but we saw some of the upside last week. Also had a punt return that was wiped off the board with a penalty. Brian Thomas Jr., another guy that people were getting really nervous about, and then we saw him lead the team in targets, receptions, and yards just on Monday night. So I think that there's a lot of fear about some of these guys, the top 3 rounds that haven't really been performing. But I still think that we're a little bit too early to abandon hope on some of those guys. So week 6, this is we're about a third of the way into the season, but I think that it's a little bit too early to hit the panic button on all of these early round picks that aren't performing.
Yeah, a lot of the time you see in the first 3, 4 weeks, you see a lot of things that are so unsustainable, like good performance and bad performance. It's like the warm-up weeks for the NFL teams and these rosters and these players. And then really once we get into week 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you really start to see who these teams are. And I think slowly we're start to see that unfold. And I agree with you, Dave, that hopefully players like Brian Thomas Jr., Lab McConkey, players who've really disappointed us in those first couple
Chase
weeks
Brown,
start to step up.
please, please, Chase Brown.
Oh, man. I don't know, man. I don't love Flacco. Flacco looked rough in Cleveland those first few games. I'm nervous about that
He
situation
did, but
still.
we also the silver lining here. We saw a game where Dylan Sampson pulled 8 targets. So I mean,
Yeah.
that is kind of the out here is that, we saw last year Chase Brown was very involved as a pass catcher. We haven't seen that at all this year from Jake Browning. Jake Browning is just going to rip the ball 40 yards downfield to a triple covered Jamar Chase. I think Joe Flacco, being a veteran, is a little bit more conscientious of getting the ball out of his hand quickly. And if his guy's not open, I think he will be willing to hit Chase Brown in the flat. So fingers crossed, I think that he makes for a decent buy low if somebody's panicking in your league.
Yeah, especially as a 40, plus you're a quarterback behind that offensive line in Cincinnati, and
Mhm.
you're going to see so much pressure. He's going to have to dump off the football a lot of times. So yeah, you could get some PPR, some gross PPR value for Chase Brown if you really want it there. But that's going to be all for the show today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Dave, please tell the people where they can find you and your content. I know you got a lot
If it-
going on.
Yeah, footballguys.com. That's the easiest way. I've got too many shows and too many articles to even list, but just sign up at footballguys.com. You'll see everything I'm doing and most of what Hutch is doing as well.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to this episode of Hutch Coming in Clutch. Greatly, greatly appreciate you. Please follow Dave on Twitter at Dave Kluge. Check out all he does. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at HutchisonB_FF. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening so you'll be notified every single time a new episode does drop. And don't forget, check out all our work over at Football Guys. Sign up for the site if you're looking for a website for fantasy football advice. Football Guys is a fantastic one. You got guys like me, Dave, Joy Ray, Alfredo Brown, many other fantastic analysts, fantastic workers over there, not only on camera, but behind the scenes, writing articles, doing all the good stuff. So make sure you check all of that out and make sure you have a great week 6. Start the right players and get fantasy points. It's that simple. It's not that hard. We'll see you all on Tuesday with reacting to week 6. Have a great week, everybody. Enjoy the football. All right, Dave. There we go, man.